Hello, today we have a special episode of Fmod in 2 minutes. I'm going to show you something that I like to do in between projects and just for fun. And I'll explain why I'm doing it just for fun. When we find ourselves on a project, sometimes it's hard to find time to practice and to experiment and to find new ways of using our tools. Tools just like Fmod. So what I like to do to combat this is to find time on the weekends or, like I said, in between big projects where I experiment. I basically play. I find a reason to play with Fmod, and in these play sessions, I discover new things that I can use, new ways of using Fmod, things that I wouldn't have done otherwise because I haven't presented myself or put myself in a situation to figure these things out. Much like a game jam or a challenge, I'm recently finding pieces of music to recreate inside of Fmod. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I figure out how to make these pieces of music play like on their own in Fmod using all the tools available. And thinking about a piece of music that I could initially use, I thought of Piano Phase by Steve Reich. I also thought it'd be pretty easy to recreate in Fmod because of the way minimalism works. The whole point of the movement of music was to create a piece of music that had a transition, had a transformation that was obvious to the ear. There's no better piece than something like Piano Phase, and listening to it you can hear basically what it has is two piano lines playing the exact same melody of 12 notes, and what happens is that one hand eventually starts shifting, starts phasing, moving one beat further along the timeline, basically creating this weird syncopation, these weird harmonies in between. And what it does is that it repeats this 12 times to the point where it eventually comes back to the original fully in sync version of the piece of music. I could totally recreate this in Fmod, right? So that's what I did. So here we go. Here's the draft event of what I was doing. You can see I've got many different events and attempts at doing it. The first thing that came to my mind was perhaps we needed to create nested events where we could put a fixed layer, i.e. the piano line that doesn't move, and then a phasing layer, the one that basically moves away from the fixed piano and causes these syncs, right? These out of syncs, as it were. This ended up being way too complicated. As soon as I tried to put this together, I added a bunch of transition markers and destination markers, hoping that maybe I could use a parameter to tell it to jump from one to the other. It was way too complicated. It barely worked, so I left it very quickly. The second idea I had was, again, to just simply have a bunch of different loops, the same loop but cut up and starting at the next note in line. Again, this was simply an attempt at doing something before I actually exported all of these things, just putting it in Fmod and just testing out how it would work with just the parameters and just the cursor jumping from one to the other. It didn't work. It was ridiculous. I don't know why I was thinking of this, but I hope that the process kind of shows you that, I just throw things at the screen in the space of, half an hour sessions here and there, and then hoping something will stick. The final thing that I had was to basically use a delay, which was probably the obvious choice from the start, but what can you do? So as you can see here, I've got a fixed layer and I've got a phasing layer. They're both exactly the same thing. And then the second one had the delay attached to it down here, right, in the plugin section. If you didn't know, you can add a whole bunch of live processing in Fmod, which takes up very little CPU. It's great, a whole host of plugins. So I'm using the delay. The initial issue that I had was the fact that the delay adds a little bit of phasing to the track, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Like, you could ask, why didn't I just have one track, one loop, and simply add the delay to that? And I will show you why. For some reason, at the lower values of the delay, which sounds really cool on its own, but it's not what I wanted. I wanted two clean pianos. Cool, so the next thing to do was to add a continuous parameter, which I did up here, right? I did 120 because I thought maybe 10 values would give me enough space to edit things comfortably, 12 being the 12 different phases before it returns back to the original synced loop. So initial value 0, starting from 0 to 120, and I named it phasing, and I hit OK. Clicking on the parameter sheet, I would then add the parameter, add the automation to the delay, go down here and add automation. At the moment it's added, so if I removed it, it would all go away. I'd right click, add automation, and then add the parameter. I'm going to go back to what I had. As you can see, I have a bunch of different delays. Again, the piece of music works in a way that it puts it out of phase with each other, then holds it there in this new state of syncopation, then phases again to the next note, holds it for a little while, then fades to the next one. The whole point of the piece was to find these different sync points, hold them, listen to how they change the piece of music, and then move on. So if I zoom in here, that's exactly what I've done. As you can see here, the piano starts on its own, then the second piano comes in, and they both play together in sync. So 10 to 15 here is the new sync point. See, 150, it stays very constant. Again, 20 to 25, I've got another one constant. What I did was also add another event with phasing delays down here. So I wrote the actual values. And the way I figured out these sync points was to literally listen to the piece of music, find each sync point, and just loop it, and then loop it on Fmod until I had the same sound, which took forever. But it was also a really nice exercise in kind of like ear training and listening out for like precise changes and everything and finding it as close as I could. So it was all really useful and really satisfying when I found it. Hey there! Before we continue with the rest of the video, I just wanted to say, did you know that I have a mailing list to help beginners getting into game audio? So if you're a student or you're just getting into the video game industry as a composer, sound designer, technical engineer, I have a mailing list that sends out tips and tricks and resources to help you on your way. If you sign up now, you get access to my free video course on how to get started, as well as some other goodies and resources that I put in there as well. Okay, back to the video. The other thing I wanted to do was to just hit play, change the parameter, and that's it. Like the least amount of processing as possible. This is useful because if you're on a project and you need somebody else to implement the work for you, then you can do all the heavy lifting in Fmod and basically tell your programmer or program it yourself as simple as possible. Literally play an event instance or attach a parameter, and that's it. So with that in mind, all I wanted to do was have to press play, click on the parameter, hit 120, and let it do it by itself. The reason it does it by itself is you can see there's a little orange circle which is just creeping its way over super slowly. And the reason for this is that if I click on the parameter, have it selected, and go down here, I can add something called seek speed. If you don't know what seek speed is, I have a specific tutorial, 2 minutes long, and I will link it above this video. I highly recommend you go through that. And basically, I can change the speed at which it changes from one value to the other. So even if I set it to 120 now, because I have it at 0.15 values per second, I think it is, it will take that long to reach the value that I've put. Basically, as you can see, the cursor up here is now moving very slowly across the timeline, even without it playing, because I've just changed the parameter, that's enough. And it will basically play the whole piece on its own, as if somebody is moving that piano and playing that piano by itself. Pretty cool, right? The other thing you can do is, which was annoying, was I can change the asymmetric thing on so that if I put it on a descending value, if I drag it back to the original thing, it snaps straight there, because I was editing this and I had the ascending and descending at the same value. And what that meant was that it would take just as long to get back to the timeline, or I had to select out and back into the event, and that was a nightmare. So asymmetric, very interesting. I can turn this to an instant, which means if I change this value to 0, boom, it snaps straight away. And that's it. At the end of this video, I'm going to play the whole piece from start to finish so that you can hear it if you like listening to it. I think it's a fantastic piece of music. I highly recommend you do, because it's really quite a meditative, and you can kind of just lose yourself in it. The other thing I'm going to do is add this project to a download link with a cleaner version of it so that you can download it and you can check it out and explore it. Use it, do whatever you want. Why was this useful? At the very end of all of this, I could imagine myself adding a layer in an adaptive piece of music where perhaps something goes out of sync to alert the player of, I don't know, tension or added intensity, or maybe an alarm system. And it doesn't have to be anywhere near this complicated or, with this many delays. But again, it's given me an idea in the back of my head that I could possibly present to a developer or a project that might solve a problem or a challenge that I have in front of me. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I have more projects to show like this, and hopefully this was useful for you, and I'll make some more videos. Cool. Thanks for watching.